Veronica, I appreciate you taking some time to be with us today. You ready to have a quick little conversation?
Let's do it, Walter.
All right. So I did a little background on guests, and I went to your website and I downloaded the guide that you offer for people. It's a great way to get to know you and what you do.
Mhm.
Um, so can we talk a little bit about the idea of a fractional chief of staff and what that means and how you can, because it's an intriguing concept. Um,
Yeah, well, I think fractional anything is an intriguing concept, right? Because I think most businesses that are growing, scaling, can't necessarily afford a full time chief that will range anywhere like 250,000 and up. But doesn't mean that the company can't be enormously serviced from that level of expertise and knowledge and experience. And so my last big post working for another brand was chief of staff at Boss Babe. And when I left Boss Babe, I was like, gosh, like I what I love to do is really help teams grow and architect the team and the structure of the team internally to get to the goals of the scaling organization. And I wanted to share that with more people. And so I have a friend who's like, oh, I'm a fractional CMO. I'm like, is that really what I think it is? It's like a quarter of a CMO. She's like, correct. They pay a quarter of what I would cost normally. So that's where it kind of comes from, is the idea that you can leverage some incredible talent and not have it completely demolish your profitability because you want the knowledge, you want the assistance, but the company's not in a place to take that on full time.
so the fractional idea,
Hmm.
something that my organization offers is a fractional sales leader,
Yeah.
and we've been doing that for about 5 years, and the idea for us is very similar. They need the service, but they necessarily
Right.
can't leverage it
Right.
to the extent that they need, but we can step in at a higher level of talent than they can afford to pay.
Right.
And it's a great means, and we always look at it as a way to help them understand what it's supposed to feel like and what how it's supposed to work. Um,
Mhm.
so that's a great. So as a chief of staff,
Mhm.
where what is it you're doing? You're helping them put together a team. Is that a
Yeah.
fair way to start?
Yeah. Yeah, my KPI is team, all things team. So what that often means is I normally come in and assess what the team looks like, where everybody's sitting, and quite frankly, almost every single time we're doing Tetris. We're shifting. People are where they're not supposed to be. We have people who are Frankenstein roles. We have people who are spread across multiple lanes. Like, so there's usually an auditing a Tetris activity early on in that kind of engagement to be like, okay, let's reconfigure what you have.
Mhm.
And then based off the reconfiguration, what do you still yet need? And that's when we would either promote from within and I can develop from within, or we're going through a recruiter recruiting from the outside. And then I'm helping that person land successfully by building a nest ahead of their arrival
Mhm.
and then making sure that the founders support this person, don't subconsciously compete with the person, especially if it's a leader. So yeah, my measurement of success is team health. And so what I tell a lot of my clients is I'm gonna take you from that 1.0 version or wherever you are. If you're 2.0, 3.0, I'm gonna take you to the next zero point 0 version of yourselves.
So it's putting the right people in the seats, but it's much more complicated
Yeah.
than that. It's making sure
Yeah.
everybody feels good about that and their
Oh yes.
best and highest use of their time.
Yeah. Well, it's human beings. I'm literally talking about human beings.
So there's like a lot of uh, people have to be good where they can be provide the greatest value. They need to be
Yes.
comfortable in that space.
Yes.
So you
Yes.
mentioned
Yes.
Frankenstein role, um,
Yeah.
and I think I understand that.
Mhm.
But if you could kind of expound on that, because I think I'm experiencing it right now. So can you help the
Yeah.
audience with that?
Yeah, so there's a difference to me between what I would consider a Swiss Army knife and a Frankenstein roll. And I think a lot of business owners believe what they're doing is really wise and crafty to be like, okay, I have this assistant. She can help me some things in marketing, some things in operations, some things in finance. And that's the definition of an assistant. An assistant can do lots of things. They wear lots of hats. They juggle lots of balls. And it's very really, really, really well circulated advice in the industry. I have found, however, that there is no greater correlation to turnover and burnout than maintaining somebody in a position where at any given time they don't know who they serve.
Mm.
They don't know if the activity is what's most important today. Is it prospecting on the sales side? Is it helping the customers on the fulfillment side? Or is it reconciling the books for your CPA or your bookkeeper? Like that's really freaking challenging because arguably all three of those activities are very important. So who determines what's the most important? And this person just feels like they're constantly getting a C minus across the board and they're never really thriving in their role. So do I love people that can wear multiple hats and juggle multiple balls? Yes, but I like to keep them within one lane and one lane only. So I would have a marketing assistant who's doing marketing centric activity within the marketing group
Hmm.
versus having a Frankenstein role, which is like a general assistant who's doing marketing, ops, sales, fulfillment, customer billing, like
Right.
that only works when you're like very, I mean, in those early stages of business, because you as the founder are a Frankenstein role, you're doing everything,
Right.
but you don't want to propel that forward with other people in the organizations and make mini yous, because if you're burnt out, guess what? That burnout transfers. So that's what I mean by avoiding a Frankenstein role that's across multiple lanes versus having a Swiss Army knife who's dedicated to one lane, one discipline, one manager, one set of KPIs, if so to
Sure.
speak.
Yeah, and keeping them so that they know they're winning or falling behind,
Yes.
help them understand it. So it comes down to a large extent of communicating what that role is supposed to do. But
Yes.
the step before that is the hard part of
Mhm.
allowing that from a founder's point of view
Mhm.
is being able to share how they're supposed to do that and what that looks
Mhm.
like, and then
Mhm.
letting it go.
Yeah.
Because that's where
Yeah.
I mean, I'll share a quick story. I had a marketing person that was sort of like a marketing quarterback. I think you might call her a marketing manager, where
Mhm. A rainmaker. Mhm.
well, she was executing on things that we decided we should do.
Mhm.
And we had a conversation yesterday where it was she was very uncomfortable, and she went through it for a few minutes. I'm like, "Are we breaking up, Kristen?"
Oh.
And she's like, "Well, and I'm like, look, it's okay. I'm not a good fit." And then we walked it through. I asked a couple of questions where I was not an ideal client for her because
Mhm.
I wasn't able to like let things go yet.
Mhm. Yeah.
So in that situation, that's marketing role, and then I have an assistant who does a bunch of things for me. And what I'm hearing is that I need to, you know, uh, take.
If your revenue can support it, the better counsel is to stop. I mean, I've heard this quote before, like a business is started with a generalist, but it's scaled with specialist, which I thought was really good advice. And that's what I'm saying. If the revenue can support it, stop relying on Frankenstein roles and start getting specialists or very like fine-tuned Swiss Army knives that are dedicated to one discipline is the counsel that I'm giving.
And it's I see it, right? Because
Mhm.
I know
Yep.
what I'm doing. I know what I'm not doing well.
Yep.
That's a so where, in your opinion, I know it probably matters the details of an organization, but if you have somebody who's a founder that is that visionary and playing
Yes.
both roles, visionary and integrator,
Yes.
where and they're successful, but they
Mhm.
can't scale doing that. So
Mhm.
split those up.
Mhm.
How how do you see that? I mean, how do you guide somebody through that process without getting into the weeds? Is there is there a fundamentals that you follow?
Yeah. I think a lot of so I'm a big fan of traction. Very, very big fan of traction and love it a lot. I also specialize with online entrepreneurs, online personalities, content creators. And so sometimes what is inside of traction doesn't always translate into the online space because the online space requires an enormous amount of content production that is so it's just some of the things don't transfer like you would a manufacturing plant,
Hmm.
right?
Right.
But I will say that I think the industry, at least my industry, jumps to getting an integrator very, very, very quickly. And I actually don't like that.
Hmm.
I think integrators, because I was an integrator, I think integrators that don't have managers or leaders underneath them are not set up for success. And I think sometimes business owners jump to the integrator like, oh, I'm just going to buy one person who can do everything. But that one person, again, the burnout just transfers from the visionary to the integrator, and the integrator has no leaders to actually lead all the doers. And that's just really stressful. That happened to me, and I was working insane
Mm,
hours to be everybody's manager. That's impossible.
sure.
Even the US military doesn't operate like that.
Right.
So for me, I think before you jump and run out and get an integrator, when I'm architecting teams, I actually try to install, either promote or recruit, install leaders first, a marketing leader, an operations leader. Once the leaders are there, then we can talk about having an integrator to complete the trifecta. But I don't jump into an integrator right away at all.
I've seen that. I've seen that play out where
Mm-hmm.
the integrator, a client, their partners, one was each, but the
Sure.
integrator didn't have anybody to
Oh, yeah.
manage,
Oh,
and
yeah. Resentment. That's what happens.
to a large degree, the relationship was such that that was uh, it didn't get to a point where there was a problem, but they recognized that he needed to add some people
Yep.
to
Good for
describe
them.
exactly what you're doing. So often, then, is it fair to say that the integrator role can become that Frankenstein role, where they're just trying to do too many things without? Is
Um,
it a different way to look at it?
yeah, because when I say Frankenstein, I really mean it like on the doing level.
Got it.
I think leaders are certainly capable because they've developed the muscle that they can have wider oversight. But again, an integrator isn't a doer.
Hmm.
If your integrators are doing, we have a problem.
Right.
Integrators should spend the bulk of their time in leading and communicating and like breaking ties. Like it's not a doing capacity. When I say Frankenstein, I mean Frankenstein in
Yep.
doing.
That's a doing.
But yes, leaders are capable of having more oversight for sure.
That's a great distinction there that I didn't pick up, the doing
Yep, all
aspect
good.
of it. Um, All right. So, from your world, your space, if we got people out there listening, what's the ideal client where you can have the greatest impact? What is that? Is there a
Yes.
space? Is there a size? What does it look?
Yeah, no, it's both, right? So my experience with all the brands that I've been very fortunate to work with, I certainly have found myself to really intimately know the online space, online entrepreneurship, very, very well. Whether it's e-com or info products, online education, online personality, content creation, like yeah, this is where I play because I've just by my experience. Like if you look at my pedigree or whatever, but as far as size goes, it's really difficult for me to play Tetris with a company where the owner's still struggling to pay themselves.
Hmm.
It's really difficult for me to architect a team where it's really just you and a whole bunch of doers, where I usually come in and certainly that can happen before seven figures. But normally when I get the call is somewhere between 1 to 3, 1 to 5 is when the owner's like, I've hit $1 million and this sucks. Why does it feel like this? I thought reaching $1 million would feel different, and it doesn't. That's normally when I get the phone call, when like the dream shatters a little bit
Hmm.
and you are beyond stress, but you have success. So for me, I know there's at least enough revenue for us to install some leaders.
Yeah, and that that statement hits home, right? Because
Yeah.
it feels like it should have been. It should things should be easier, but it
Yeah,
it
it's
isn't.
not.
It really isn't.
It's really not. Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
and I really need to um, let go. Is there any you got any simple advice for somebody that isn't used to letting go and
Oh
creating
goodness. Okay,
trust?
so yes, here's the thing. You and I both know that when the business is doing well, you feel good. And when the business isn't doing well, you don't feel good. And that just shows you that a lot of our identity and a lot of our feelings and thoughts and assumptions are tied with the success of a business. So majority of what happens when I hear a business owner say, I don't want to be a micromanager, but I feel like I'm being a micromanager, or like a lot of that language I hear, it's not so much that like you don't want to let go. It's just like, this is your baby. This is your baby. And heaven forbid you give your baby to an unqualified babysitter. Like, right? Like that's I think the scariest thing. No one will care as much as I do, and no one will know how my baby likes to be rocked. Nobody knows that the mangoes is going to make them break out. Like there's just so many things. There's so much emotional and mental attachment to your business
Hmm.
that makes it extremely difficult for you to let go. I remember when I was designing I have a program called the Rainmaker Residency. I literally develop marketing leaders, but it's a 2-for-1 program where it involves the founder, the visionary, and the marketer because they tend to compete with each other if we're not
Yeah.
careful. And I knew when I was building this program that I needed to bring an expert who was the mindset expert. I'm not even talking about mindset coach. I'm talking like a coach. I'm not even talking about that. I'm talking about an executive alignment person who knows therapy, knows the mind, knows the traps, but specifies in working with executives. And that's what I did. So if you can tell in yourself that I am sabotaging this without meaning to, that's when we have to look inward because there's not going to be an external fix to that.
Hmm. That's fair. It's that's there's a lot there to
Yeah, I know. It's like I tell my husband all the time, like, what's harder, marriage, parenthood, or entrepreneurship? Because all of them have humbled me to my knees. Like, oh, it is the most refinement. Like, when they say like, refinement, but man, it's like a fiery cauldron of
but
refinement.
there but there's the thread that runs through all of them that gets us into trouble in each of those separate roles is communication
Oh
or
yeah.
shitty communication for
Yes.
right
Yes.
in
Yes.
every situation I can take it back to that's not what I meant,
That's not what I meant.
right, in
Yep.
each one of those roles, right, I mean,
Yep.
I have a daughter and to me,
Yes.
and it probably didn't have a lot to do with me as a dad, but that is the easiest of the three by far. And
Parenting for you?
yeah, because it goes back to something else you said about finding a competent babysitter.
Yeah.
When my wife and I worked, and my daughter spent a tremendous amount of time with my mother,
Care. Yep. Mhm.
and so we didn't worry because we knew she was safe and
Well, she's grandma. She'll love that baby bit more than you will.
right. We had to tell her, like, look, you can
Yeah.
discipline her. No is still the thing you told us a
Yes.
lot. Well, you could do
Yeah.
that with her. But
Yeah.
so like I didn't have a lot to do with that. She's just a really good kid, a really good person, makes
Yeah.
good decisions.
Yeah.
Um, but the other two are require
More.
diligence and work
Yeah.
and
Yep.
solid communication. So,
Yep.
um, but for me, letting go, it's not. I don't want. If I let it go, I'm not going to micromanage. I have a tendency. This is what I say. If I give you this, and I give you the why behind it, and you say you understand, I'm
Go
done.
for it. Yeah. You're the how and who. Get it done.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I need you to come back to me and say I'm stuck or I
Yep.
need
Yep. Yep.
something.
Yep.
And it's at the point when they don't and the outcome doesn't happen, not good or bad, it just
Mm-hmm.
doesn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I get frustrated because I don't want to be a
Yep.
micromanager because I never
Yep.
liked that.
Yeah.
That's great. So the large part of what you do is psychology.
I hold a lot of space. It's funny this week. I don't know what was up with this week. I don't know if the some planet was angry. I don't even know.
Jupiter's
But
moon.
this week was it was tough. Almost every one of my clients cried on the phone with me, not because I made them cry, but just circumstantial,
Mhm.
very, And so yes, I think part of what I do certainly is holding emotional space for a lot of big feelings
Yeah.
because owning a business is really hard. And sometimes you feel like it's very, I should say, it's just very lonely at the top. Like it's extremely lonely being the founder and you don't have the privilege the bigger you get to just like vent to your team because that has enormous ramifications and your girlfriends don't get it and your partner's tired of hearing it. And so I often am that person, as certainly as a fractional chief of staff, where I'm the person that can receive that and like we can actually do something about it and they feel safe to deliver it to me.
Yeah, but that says a lot about the relationships that you create, right? Because
Sure,
there
sure,
is
sure.
a space of comfort and
Trust, yeah,
safety and trust. Well, trust
of
is
course.
there, but there's also that sense of safe
Sure.
being
Yeah.
safe, and that says that you're really going deep with people. Um,
Oh, yeah.
and but that's got to be tiring. That's got to be exhausting.
There, I mean, yes, and I see the thing is, you don't get to. I think even as a female, you don't get to a place of success in your career without a certain amount of grit and like
Oh, absolutely.
a high tolerance or a threshold for pressure tolerance. You know, like there just is. And again, like I said, my parents are from Cuba, so like I was certainly built a certain way, and I'm very appreciative for what has gone into me
Hmm.
to make me the person I am. But I'm also constantly seeking self improvement, and I have my little techniques that, when it's a really overwhelming day, there's that chair that you see behind me is literally the chair. It's called the transition chair, where before I even go out into my life and I leave this chair, I sit in that chair.
Mm.
And like Brendan Bouchard has a phenomenal book called High Performance Habit. And he really talks about those that can be successful within their transitions are the ones that can have success overall. And I really believe that. Like it's hard to be a mother, a wife, a chief of staff, a leader, a friend, all the titles, all the things that I carry too, if I'm not very conscious between my transitions as well.
Those transitions are they can happen instantaneously
Yeah.
if we don't put some sort of
Yeah.
protection devices in place.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And the people around us have the same issues,
Yeah.
right? And not everybody's self-aware.
Yeah.
But being brought up the way you were brought up, and having those skills, and being mindful of them, always trying to improve a little bit here, a little bit there.
Yeah.
Um, I think that's what helps somebody be truly successful, because it's one thing to be, tight, you have your identity tied to a business, and how the dangers that go along with that. But if we focus on that I that is us, and that
Hmm.
role for ourselves, we
Oh, yeah.
can't really be the best that we can for our spouse or
Right.
children or clients
Right.
without that. Um,
Yeah, I think Warren Buffett is famous for saying that, but like you'll never regret an investment in yourself or your own human capital, your own intellectual capital, right? So for me, I'm very conscious of that, and I want to be a lifelong learner. And so there's different stages, where I learn about kids because I'm having kids, or I learn about business because I'm growing a business, or I learn about, compassion or grief because I've gone through loss. Like you're always learning. And as long as you're open to that, because, it can really crack you open if you're not careful.
sure.
So,
But being open to it allows it to come to you when you need it,
yes.
not just when.
Yeah. And for others, right? You become a vessel for others in that way. Uh-huh.
Absolutely. All right. So the way we usually end these, and I think we have something
Yes.
here. I usually tie it together with, like, do you have a relationship with cigars in your life? Is it
Oh, yes.
if you have something to share, this would be great.
Yeah, this is an easy one for me because, like I said, my parents are from Cuba. So my mom came when she was 18, and my dad was, I think, 22. And my mom, literally, as a little girl, actually would sew and roll the Tabasco, like the tobacco leaves, into making very famous Cuban cigars. So doesn't get any closer than that.
No, that's a pretty intimate
Yeah.
relationship. And rolling Cuban cigars is different than rolling traditional cigars. They have a different way of
Sure.
doing it. And
Sure.
aside from the dirt and the air in Cuba, um, the tobacco is different. But that rolling is a whole
Yeah.
different animal.
Yeah.
That's cool. You were born in the States, and
Here, I'm first generation on both sides. I'm the guinea pig in the States,
did
in
they come
Florida,
over
yeah.
together, or did they?
No, 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 my mom came on the Mariel boat lift. She came on a big shrimp boat with, like, 400 Cubans,
Wow.
and my dad went through Costa Rica to get the proper paper. It's a lot harder for men to leave the country than it is for females.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah,
Well, I appreciate you taking the time. There's some deep stuff that I think we kind
yeah,
of just touched around. Um,
yeah, great podcast.
Best way for people to reach out to you, your website, LinkedIn, what's best?
Yeah, please. I'm everywhere just as my name. So veronicaromney.com. Also social media everywhere is just V Romney. So easy to find me.
All right, we'll put that stuff in the show notes. Thank you. This was awesome. Really appreciate it.
Likewise.